Now I want your calls on this. Should companies be forced to share their profits with the workers? Bakery giant Greggs have decided to give a share of their windfall to staff this year to recognise their hard work and effort. Now, the high street chain racked up a record annual profit last year, and about 25,000 workers will get a slice of the bonus pie in their next paycheck. But should all businesses be made to do this? 0207 862 2222 is the number to give us a ring with your thoughts. Dehenna, good news, good idea?
I think it's a lovely story, and I think if I were to run a really successful business, I would want to give back to the workers that had helped make that happen. But the question is, should we force companies to do that? No, we shouldn't. Ultimately, this is a private decision for a private business, and how they want to conduct their business is their matter. You would think that a good business would want to reward their workers anyway, but I think we need to actually get out of the way, put less restrictions on business, let them do their thing, let them make profit. I think in this country, we've got kind of terrified of saying that people wanting to make profit is a good thing. There is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing people should feel guilty about for wanting to make profit. And ultimately, it's making the economy a better, more vibrant place, which is making the pie better for everybody.
But this is allowing staff to earn a profit too, which is surely even better. And it sounds lovely. Companies aren't doing it though. So in order to make companies nicer places, maybe the government has to step in?
But I don't think we should be restricting businesses and forcing them to do anything. A good business will do the right thing. And as I say, if I were running a business, I'd like to think I'd be doing the same thing for my workers. But there's nothing wrong with the private individual running a business and choosing how they spend their own profits.
Well, we've seen how that approach has worked. In 1965, the average CEO had a pay 21 times greater than the typical worker there. It is now 344 times higher. Now, workers create the wealth in society through their hard graft, through their hands or through their brains. No company can work without them. They create the wealth in society. And what we've seen in Britain over the last now, getting over 2 lost decades of living standards, the longest squeeze in people's pay since the early 19th century. The average person now the average worker is worse off now than they were when the Conservatives came to power. That's what happens if you let businesses just do what they want. The main problem, I would say, is because we've got weak trade unions. If you look at places like Scandinavia, Sweden, Finland, they have much stronger trade unions, and workers have more pay and better living standards, because what trade unions do is give workers strength to say, actually, we're the ones propping up your business, we're making the cash, we're making the profit for you, you wouldn't be rich without us, which we know, because if we withdraw our labour, your business won't work anymore. So we should have a fairer share of the wealth that is created.
I hear what you're saying, and our unions aren't as strong as they were, say, in the late 70s. However, that's because people aren't really joining them. They're weakened by government policy, but they have also been weakened by their numbers.
Well, you're right.
That's people just don't want to be part of a union. Why is that?
Well, we've got the strongest anti-trade union laws in the Western world. No other Western country has more stringent anti-union laws than we do. That makes it, for example, very hard for them to organise in the workplace. You're right, there's actually challenges. For example, it used to be the case that people, for example, might have worked in a mine or a factory all their life. People now go off and shift jobs quite a lot. That makes it quite hard to organise. But the truth is, the collapse in union membership, which was a lot to do with the anti-union laws, has meant that workers' pay, it's one of the main reasons workers' pay has stagnated or fallen, actually, in real terms, over the last few years. That's bad, actually, for the business and economy, because if you put money in the pockets of those at the top, they tend to save it. They put it in offshore tax havens and so on. Low-paid workers, you put money in their pocket, they go and spend it, and that's good for local businesses.
They can spend it and they might be more productive. And there are 2 ways in order to grow the economy, something that we desperately need, particularly at the moment. So maybe, Dehenna, this is actually somewhere where the government, although you don't like people making laws on businesses or constraining businesses, maybe this is somewhere that it has to happen.
Well, I already think we have really kind of over-regulated business as it is. It's right that we have regulations on things like, environmental and working conditions. I think that's really important. But ultimately, some of the most successful economies in the world actually have pretty deregulated businesses that can get on and do business without over-government interference. On the point of trade unions, a genuine question, this isn't me trying to get a gotcha moment, but do you think there is a point whereby people are not joining the trade unions because the leadership seems to be overly politicised and interested too much in issues that don't necessarily directly affect their work, and they'll be, on panel shows talking about stuff that isn't actually impacting their own workers?
I don't think so. I think the main problem is the media don't report on what the biggest democratic movement in the country does. It's over 6 million workers in trade unions. That's lower than it was, but it's still a huge number of people. And what often happens is the media don't take an interest in what trade unions do on a daily basis. If you actually look at what trade union officials are doing, they're not doing politicking, they're organising in workplaces. If you look, for example, at the moment, Unite, Sharon Graham, she doesn't actually talk about the Labour Party at all. And what she does is focus, her whole approach is using what she calls leverage to get companies to, for example, increase pay for their workers.
But then
That's what she focuses on.
But then you do get the guys like Mick Lynch, who are big characters and very highly politically driven. Which
Very
I think,
successful.
But which I also think puts off a lot of people from wanting to get in any way involved in the union.
But I think that's
that's
a bad example for what you're arguing, because in the rail industry, and the transport industry, because he represents rail, transport, and rail, maritime and transport sectors, they have very high levels of union membership. And that's because they have a strong leadership that actually achieves things, because they've just won a victory.
And a leadership, and how much does it wind up people watching at home who are literally unable to get to work when there are these ridiculous levels of strikes for train drivers that are on 65 grand a year plus?
People support people support those strikes, and that's because actually most of their workers are earning like £20,000 to £30,000.
We've deviated on unions here, but let's get back to the chat here. Do you think staff should share in the profits of a company? Stuart, what's your thoughts?
Hi. Well, my thoughts are more or less aligned with Owen's, that, this government should realise that, as Margaret Thatcher thought she got rid of the unions in the 80s, the unions have actually got rid of this government effectively, because they haven't looked after working people and their wages. And I don't think it should be left really to sort of companies to decide whether to throw a few more extra crumbs to its workforce. So my thoughts are: invest in unions, join your union, and secure a decent wage that way, and then you won't need to be hoping for
some of the profits. Interesting. I'll throw that to Dehenna. What do you say to Stuart?
I just kind of, when you extrapolate that and kind of take it up the chain, I wonder how that would work in practice. Like, let's say we had a beautifully kind of idealistic regime whereby any bit of profit had to be shared out completely amongst the workers fairly. It's not going to work, because there would be no incentive to do business. There would be no incentive to start a business, to hire people, because ultimately a lot of people who start business are driven because they want to make profit. They want to build a better life for them, for their families. As their businesses grow, they employ more people. That drive would go if you had to share out every single penny with your workers.
It is an interesting concept when you look at companies with shareholders, for example. If you're going to invest in a company and put money in, are you going to put money in the company that you know that when they make really good profits are going to give most of that to their staff and you're going to see none of it? Or are you going to invest your most money in a company that is going to give you the kickback that you're looking for?
Well, I'm not looking at shareholders and how they're doing. I'm looking at the actual people that are doing the work.
I know, Stuart, but the shareholders are the money people. They're the ones that are going to invest. Do we want to see more investment, is what I'm asking. And if we want to see more investment, maybe this isn't the right approach.
Well, maybe the shareholders need to realise also that a satisfied workforce and a job satisfaction is as important to a company as perhaps the increase in shares they might get. Maybe it's a bit more sort of long-term thinking that's needed. And, to answer the question of the Tory MP, we really need the ratios to keep increasing at the rate that they have between management and workforce?
Sorry, OK, I thought you were going to go
and just the point there, Dehenna, that in terms of, firstly, I'd actually want workers-owned companies, and then you would actually then distribute the profits, and that would be an incentive, because then the harder they work, the more profits they would be shared amongst the workers. But in any case, with Greggs, they still make profits. They shared some of it with the workers.
It was also only 10%, so it wasn't all of the profit, obviously.
But the other point is, it's bad. If you look around the country now, there are many towns that are really struggling, and actually their hearts were ripped out of them when industries collapsed. That was never rebuilt. A lot of the problem is because people aren't paid properly, they can't spend properly in their local communities. If workers are paid more, that's good for local businesses.
But that's an argument to increase the wage rather than give them a kickback on profits. It would be easier to manage your money if you were given more money on a regular basis rather than just a bonus.
And also, if I may, I think a lot of the towns that are seeing a revival from that kind of post-original industrial phase are seeing it because of international investment. And if we have an economy where it is perceived around the world that we have over-restriction on businesses, it is less likely we're going to get that international investment here in Britain that will create the good, high-skilled, high-quality jobs that can revitalise towns and parts of the world like Teesside, which has done really well from global investment.
Sweden are doing much better than us in terms of their living standards. But I think, by the way, another way around this, and actually this is, people have suggested this, I think it's a really good idea, is you give workers automatically in every business, say 5%, 10% of the shares, and then you
I don't know how much the shares are, but John Lewis are definitely doing some sort of very similar.
Well, that's a
thing.
cooperative.
So there are companies that are absolutely getting involved with this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a co-op.
But then Mexico's got it enshrined in law, which is an interesting way of doing it, and that's what we're asking. Really, is this something that we should be doing here and taking on board across businesses? Stuart, thank you for your call. Terry from Warwickshire, what's your thoughts?
Hi, great show. I just wanted to say, before we actually think about distributing profits among workers, can we get companies, first of all, to invest in the equipment so that workers don't have to work on a shoestring to deliver the goods and the equipment, everything that makes a profit for a company, before you start thinking about sharing profits with workers?
Interesting. I mean, like new ovens for Greggs, for example, rather than a bonus at the end of the year. I wonder how you make that work. Is that something the government can get involved in?
It's something the government is getting involved in. I kind of used to work in research and development before I entered, and one of the great schemes we had was something called research and development tax credits, which effectively gives a bit of a tax rebate to companies who are investing in new technologies, and also something called capital allowances, where if you're upgrading your technology, or in the Greggs sense, upgrading your ovens.
Is this not something they do with gas companies and power companies?
Yeah, effectively, you get a portion of the tax that you would pay back for investing in new technologies that will help make your business more productive and ultimately, for many of the staff, a better place to work.
Is it not also a way of just avoiding tax?
Well, that's interesting. Rishi Sunak, when he increased corporation tax, which was seen as an unconservative thing to do, something I supported, the point he made is the Tories had cut corporation tax with the hope that that extra money that companies would have, they'd invest it, and they didn't. That was the case he made. He's a right-wing conservative, and I agree with him. The problem has actually been, over the years, companies sit on these profits. I think a good way, as I said, profit sharing would be you automatically give workers a share of the company. It also makes them more invested in the company that they're part of.
I mean, it's all very interesting. I suppose we've got some messages coming in, so people online are saying, thank you very much for your call, Terry. It's something I hadn't thought about. Mark on X says it could help staff retention and incentivise increased productivity as well. Why should just the CEO, directors and shareholders benefit from the profitability of the company? Anne on X says, I totally agree that the workforce should be rewarded for their commitment and loyalty when it comes to getting a bonus. It's all tax deductible anyway, so it can benefit both. Well, that's interesting. That actually puts a sort of different angle on it, why Greggs might be doing it as well. But this is all very, very interesting. We'll see what other companies follow suit on this. But I bet you Greggs staff are very happy with what's been happening. Thank you very much for all your...